Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week is my old co-worker, Sam. Welcome back, Sam.
Oh, thanks for having me on again, Daniel. It's good to be back and knowing I won't have to edit this episode afterwards.
Doesn't that feel great when you don't have to edit
a show? Oh, it's incredible. You've truly spoiled all of us.
Man, whenever I guest on like Buds Bros and Superheroes or anyone else's show, I tend to mention that at the end of the episode. I'm like, I'm just glad I don't have to edit this shit. I can just retweet it when you post it.
That's right. Go straight on the timeline.
Yeah, we'll talk about Ronin Console. I want to hear your editing thoughts. But first, if this is your very first episode of the show, the way we format it is we go through this week's news, and then we end it with the Brokehead block, which is the more personal side of the show, where you get to know Sam and I a little bit better. Things like editing, CGC, some work stories that I definitely want to talk with you about. But let's jump right in and explore sector number 555. So this first one involves some video game news as Naughty Dog president and The Last of Us creator Neil Druckmann noted in an interview with El Español that The Last of Us Part 3 would likely use elements from the show. So he refrained from giving any specifics, but it definitely seems like all of this Last of Us media will be influencing each other in various ways. Do you think that's a good idea, Sam, when shows and games or shows and movies influence one another?
So I think it's a potentially good idea because if there's one thing we know about fans is that they love Easter eggs. So I do think it can be really exciting when you have a cross-media platform like this that does interact with itself, but it can be a slippery slope too. I mean, there have been a lot of multimedia projects over the years where they get too invested in being adamant that their fans watch and experience everything. And it's like, people only have so much time, so not everyone can play the games and watch the show. And, I wouldn't be shocked if, a year from now we're talking about a Last of Us comic too that's also incorporated. So I think this stuff is cool. It's just, I do think it's good to err on the side of caution where it's like, hey, if you caught this, you get like kudos essentially, and there's more stuff into you. But I think making everything integral to everything else can be really discouraging for fans that don't have time to partake in everything. Like, I know you don't have a ton of time to play video games, so it's like it would be frustrating if, they incorporate all of this movie stuff into the game and then vice versa, like the game stuff then is integral to the show later on. And it's like, well, fuck, I'm not going to watch it now because I don't have all of the information.
Normally when stuff like this happens, yeah, I am more on the side of like, let's keep these things separate. Let's not mess with the game creators. Let them do their game. Usually it's corporate mandated. Like, let's make sure that we make the character look more like this. They did it with Dead Space. After the success of Dead Space 1, EA went in and said, well, we need to make the protagonist, we need to give him a voice. Let's make him younger. Let's make him more relatable to the gamers. So then it started to change from what Dead Space 1 was. In this case, though, this is special because it's rare that the game creators are so involved with the media property, so with the shows or the movies. And in Neil's case, he's able to work with his co-creators from the game as well, and they translated the game into the show. So he has been able to take some ideas even. One of the things I listened to the Last of Us podcast, and something they had to put into the show so that it works out better, and it was actually, I think, a producer move, a suggestion of, in the game, I guess the spores are what activate, and when people get infected by the spores as opposed to like getting bitten or getting the tendrils in you. So in the show, they made it so that there's these roots, like in real mushrooms, that are all throughout the city. And if you step on a certain one, that alerts the rest of the hive as to where you are or where there's activity. So that wakes them all up. And on the show, Neil was like, when they implemented that into the suggestions, I was like, son of a bitch, why didn't we think of that? Those fucking bastards. So he strongly hinted that mechanic will be in Last of Us Part 3. He left it as like, if there's ever a Part 3, but they're working on Part 3 now.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, in a month that gets announced. Like those games are just they print money.
Obviously, on the opposite end of that, I mentioned Dead Space, but I mean, we're seeing this with Warner Brothers Discovery, where the games have to match the movies. So that's like a bad example of these things. But I think they're pretty safe with these changes or this cross pollination between the two.
Yeah, I actually think the show is very good, and I think it's more than okay, especially with this specific situation, for you to make some changes to cater to your audience a little bit, because I think gamers are pretty used to suspending a certain amount of logic or disbelief as long as the story is told well. Whereas TV, like, you're just watching, right? You're not involved directly with what's happening. So you have or at least I know I do, a tendency to be a little more nitpicky, because like, you are just there to watch the writing unfold. There's no input of your own. So I think making it a little more relatable to, like you said, like mushrooms in real life and things like that, it's cool for the people watching because they have something to relate to. My fear with this type of stuff is, you and I both grew up in the era of, how do we sell toys with this? I don't think we're going back to that by any means, but it's like, I don't want this turning into Batman and Robin, where it's like, we don't care about what's going on with this. We're just here to move fucking product, which we're a far cry from that. But whenever I hear, like, cross media marketing, I'm like, oh boy, strap in, guys.
Are we going to get the Pedro Pascal skins for Last of Us 3?
We were having a conversation at my job earlier about what MCU film does Pedro Pascal show up in, but
oh yeah,
thankfully it was mostly a joke, but it's probably going to happen.
Probably. I think it's a matter of time before they scoop him right up.
Oh yeah.
Well, something else from when you and I were growing up is Good Burger, and I repeated this to Kelly today, and she churned to dust instantly. 25 years after the first Good Burger film, Paramount Plus and Nickelodeon Studios has ordered Good Burger 2, which it will star Kel Mitchell, and Kenan Thompson. So right now you can stream all of Good Burger on Paramount Plus. Good Burger 2 will exclusively premiere on that service later this year. Were you a Good Burger guy, Kenan and Kel, anything Nickelodeon?
Oh my God, yeah. Kenan and Kel was it was the one time my brother and I got along, was when we would sit down, watch Kenan and Kel, and as soon as that Coolio intro came on, we were like, don't talk for the next 20 minutes, anybody. And yeah, I loved Good Burger. I had it on that orange VHS tape.
Yes.
Yeah, that era of Nickelodeon was all I watched for a while. It was like Kenan and Kel, Kablam, all that, The Amanda Show, all of that stuff was just on repeat in my house. And like in the mornings, it was like All Real Monsters. So anything from that era that I hear about getting greenlit, I'm like, yeah, full send that shit, man. I'm here for it. I'll buy a ticket. I'll resubscribe to Paramount Plus. I don't care. And I think Kenan Thompson's funny as hell, man. I watched him on SNL for a long time, so I'm very excited about this.
So Good Burger, we've got Legends of the Hidden Temple that came back. Are You Afraid of the Dark came back.
Yeah.
We're missing Guts, and we're missing quite a bit, but I think Guts should come back. And then they tried to do Doug. They tried to do Rugrats. Rugrats came back, and it became like a 3D animated thing you can watch on Paramount Plus. But yeah, I guess All Real Monsters would be the next one.
Yeah, I'd be really hyped for that. I remember my parents being like, "Should you be watching this?" And it's like, "Well, you let me watch Beetlejuice," which that's another one. Remember the Beetlejuice animated series?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Send that shit back too. Michael Keaton's still around. I mean, you can get him back in there.
I guess so.
Yeah, I really liked this era of television. I think it was like a really good time of being like, hey, kids are not stupid, man. You can tell some like thought-provoking, maybe even some slightly edgy jokes, and they're going to think it's funny. Because this was really kind of like the forefront of kids being internet literate, I think. So we got a lot more adult humor than I think our parents really caught on to, because for the first time, like, information was just being shared so openly, and like people our age were the main ones, like, going on in chat rooms and on forums because we had to look up game guides and just being exposed to all kinds of shit that we probably shouldn't have. But like this show, that movie and Kenan and Kel hit all of the right notes.
And that's the other one that I'm hoping on, for Kenan and Kel to do like a reunion special or a movie, anything like that. You can catch all of Kenan and Kel as well, but that one's on Netflix. I think the movie, I don't know if it was a Christmas movie or Halloween, that one is not on Netflix yet. I don't know where that ended up, but I hope that's next, because personally I was more of a Kenan and Kel guy than I was a Good Burger. Good Burger obviously was like an SNL or all that sketch prolonged or made longer, but whereas Kenan and Kel was like a sitcom
with really good, like, off the cuff jokes.
It would always show the thing like filmed in front of a live studio audience in Orlando, Florida. And I was like, man, I want to go there. I want to be a part of that. I want to see all of this stuff.
I miss that. I don't know about you, but I miss sitcoms being filmed in front of a live audience and hearing the reactions. And also, yeah, like you said, that visceral one of like, where are they at? Let me be in that audience.
Well, if Good Burger 2 does really well, I'm sure they'll go back and revisit some of the other projects from our childhood. We have some Disney Plus news, which is always a good thing, always a good news bit for Disney, as Samba TV provided the wrap with data indicating that The Mandalorian Season 3's debut was viewed by a disappointing 1.5 million households. So the Book of Boba Fett premiered at a higher viewership with over 1.5 million. Obi-Wan Kenobi outperformed The Mandalorian Season 3 with a staggering 28% increase. And then in comparison, The Mandalorian Season 2 had a significantly higher viewership of around 25% over Season 3. Now, I'm not a Samba guy. I don't like them, but I know a lot of people put a lot of trust into Samba, and if that's significant with the rest of these seasons, it sounds like Season 3 might be it for The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I think this is just something that, people have been talking about a long time. I think this is just Star Wars fatigue, man. And it's like, I think there's a way to get audiences past it. And I think that way is to keep coming up with new projects as opposed to prolonging story threads to the point where you eventually hit diminishing returns. Like you said, Book of Boba Fett had a higher viewership. Obi-Wan had a higher viewership. And that was because it touched on things that we didn't know about yet. With The Mandalorian, I've only seen season 1, but a lot of my friends are really into it. And even my friends that like it, the complaint was, I thought it was cool when it was kind of like a villain or monster of the week thing. But with the prolonged stories, the long format storytelling, it just has a feeling of being like, how far can we pull this thread, So I think 3 seasons, honestly, is plenty. There's probably still stuff that they have to wrap up, but I believe those episodes are anywhere from 25 minutes to 45 minutes a piece. So when you have free reign with episode duration, I feel like you need to be fairly deliberate about how you deliver plot points. So I think if this is where it ends, then it had a good run.
It seemed like people enjoyed it, like you were saying. At least when I worked at the comic shop, people would not stop talking about it. That first season was when it came out. And now I'm seeing a lot of Star Wars fans pointing out a lot of the stupid shit that Disney's doing, even in The Mandalorian. Like, they were already shitting all over Obi-Wan and the Book of Boba. But for this, they're like, okay, now it's getting shitty even in The Mandalorian. So I don't know how much of that was like, okay, Star Wars fans are going to hate this anyway because they hate their thing more than anyone. But it also seems like they're starting to churn on their beloved Mandalorian, which was like the one thing that they did enjoy.
Yeah, and it's very, you just said it very accurately. No one hates Star Wars as much as Star Wars fans. I think if you're a casual viewer, there's probably something to enjoy in all of this stuff. But like, the thing with being a Star Wars fan has always been nitpicking the minutia. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the other thing, right? The longer you draw this out, the more stuff they're going to have to nitpick about, and the harder it's going to be to make everything cohesive, because that universe has already been like really hard to kind of piece together for a while now, because there's so much content. You have the movies, you have the games again now, you have all of these mini and maxi series, the comic books are canon again, the novels are canon again. Like, there's so much stuff to where everything can just start conflicting with itself. So I really think the way to do Star Wars anymore is in short snippets. I think the longer you draw out a project, the more pissy the fans are going to get about it.
Yeah, it'd be sort of like if Warner Brothers had, like, they started doing the Fantastic Beasts. It would be as if they did those 3 movies and then like 4 more shows, in spite of like how people were reacting to it, and just keeping it going just because you have the property and you better be making money on it. That's kind of what it feels like just from an outsider.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's been the Star Wars recipe since this newer trilogy launched, honestly, is, how long can we keep the money churning for? In the beginning, it made sense because we hadn't had a Star Wars movie in 15 years, somewhere around there. And back then, like, everyone agreed that they hated the prequels. Now a lot of people have changed their tune on that. But when your last project was underwhelming and you have a property from us and storylines from 30 years ago that people love, you can really only go up. Now it feels like they've seen so much success that we're now in the tailspin.
And I'll be enjoying watching that tailspin from afar, just as someone who's a very casual. I didn't even watch episode 9. I think that's what the last one was. But I did watch the last ones before that, and I'm like, they were fine. They're Star Wars. Like, even The Last Jedi, which a lot of people hated. I was like, it was Star Wars. Like, to me, it's just standard Star Wars, as bad as it is or as good as it is. So I'll be following some of this as they continue to churn out projects. David Ayer has once again made our news this week, as he took to Twitter to defend alleged pedo Gunn by addressing a fan complaint claiming that Gunn's wife, Jennifer Holland, is in every DC project. So David tweeted, quote, "There are those who are committed to taking cheap shots from the grassy knoll. The high road of positivity and creation will always win. Right now, you have the hardest job in Hollywood, and you'll make it look as easy and a little fun." End quote. Why the hell is David still sucking James Gunn's dick? Like, what the hell is going on there? Do you think he's begging for a fucking project?
He's trying to play this where it's like, if he gets the Ayer cut, then it's going to look, guys, it was all worth it, right? And it's like, things aren't worth it, man. Compromising your morals is generally not worth it. I don't know, dude. It's just such a weird look. With the way that, you would think with the way he got shafted, he'd be one of the last people that wanted to interact with anyone at DC ever again. So this is just such a strange vibe to me. I mean, maybe this is a move to get something greenlit, but there's got to be better ways, right?
Even if you take away the moral implications behind being involved with anyone like Gunn in the past has liked tweets that were anti David's movie, and that this is something that they screenshotted and they showed to David, like, look, the guy doesn't like you. James Gunn doesn't like your movie. And then on top of that, there were these tweets before James came into power of like, you would release the Ayer cut, right? He's like, oh, absolutely. It should absolutely get released. And now that he's in power, they're like, okay, where the fuck is it? You have the power to release it. Why aren't you coming through with doing good by David? And he's just quiet on it, right? So it just seems like, even just on that, if I were David, I'd be like, fuck this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's like, he's done his part, right? More than his part. At this point, I would go, all right, release it or not, man. Do what you want. But like you said, he's liking tweets in opposition of David. Why are you still trying to help this guy out? He's to everyone else's knowledge, the public's knowledge, he's not doing anything to help you, whether it's a new project or, releasing his original version of Suicide Squad. So now it's kind of like, is David Ayer in financial trouble? Does he need work? Like, what's going
Right.
on with this?
Yeah, that could be it. Or he's got something lined up with Gunn already, like he's going to have him direct something. I don't know. But it's just really bizarre to see this flip flop to David, who used to be, this is the guy that at Comic-Con during the Suicide Squad trailer, he famously said and wrote on posters, "Fuck Marvel." Like now that energy is gone. The dude is on a leash or something.
Right.
And it is true that Gunn's wife seems to be showing up and everything. There was this joke on Twitter. We were like, she's going to be a new member of the Justice League in the new universe. They're going to keep her in canon because of Peacemaker. I guess she plays someone in that. And that was the joke. But then she shows up in the fuck spoilers. I don't give a damn about Shazam 2. She shows up in the Shazam 2 post-credit scene. Like she has a conversation with him. And we were like, oh shit, we were fucking joking, but it's fucking true. Now she's showing up in movies. I wouldn't be shocked if that was a reshoot to like get her more in front of people's eyes. We know she's married to Gunn, and we know she knows Peter Safran, who's the other head of DC. So we're going to start seeing way more of her than we already have. She was already also an Aquaman. She was one of the water people in that.
So she's going to show up in Justice League as 4 different characters is what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
It's going to be Jack Nicholson and Mars Attacks, but doubled. She's just going to be in every frame. It's a Hollywood nepotism is so fucking weird to me, man. Like, it's almost like saying, I know I have your money. Watch this. I don't even care about casting, a good or legitimate actor because I can just put who I want in there. It's so fucking silly to me.
Well, speaking of Shazam 2, because people listen to the tomato. They do. They like to say they don't, but they do. The score currently sits at a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes. So this marks DC's second rotten score in a row after Black Adam from October. That matches Joey Whedon's Justice League at 39%. So again, when it's a good score, when it's a bad score, I'm one of those that says, who gives a shit what the score is? But in this case, I know fucking DC fans. I know Marvel fans. I saw it on the thing. The same people that are like, yeah, it's got a good score. It's probably pretty good. When they see the bad score, they're like, well, I'm going to go see it for myself and I'm going to judge it for myself. So when they care about the film, that's when the score matters.
Right. And when the film does well.
Exactly.
Which, I know someone at work that saw it and they said it committed the ultimate cinema sin, which is like, it's just fucking boring. Didn't the director himself comment, yeah, I was kind of aware that I was on a sinking ship. I just had to get it out at that point.
Yes, and that's actually a part of the next news story on Reddit. So in that subreddit, there was a post shared about Shazam 2 only making $30 million over its opening weekend. Fucking $30 million. And as you were saying, David Sandberg replied to this subreddit and he said, quote, "No worries. I saw where this was heading a long time ago. I'll be all right, though. I got paid all my money up front." So before we go into Zachary Levi's opposite take on this, I mean, that says right there that there's no Shazam 3 coming from David.
Oh, yeah, for sure. When they're real about it like that, it almost makes me regain some respect for him because he's being honest, right? Like, this sounds like he was like, this was not a passion project for him. This was, okay, here's this movie. All right, cool. And then, for one reason or another, it seems like didn't entirely feel excited about the direction the movie took. And so, I always respect when somebody's like, hey man, thanks for your concern. I know it's shit. I already got paid though. So, it is what it is.
And I'm sure that didn't help the box office at all. He probably doesn't get a box office bonus out of this, which is probably why he's like, yeah, fuck it. It's out. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. On one end, it's like, oh, that sucks for him. But on the other, it's like, well, this kind of goes in accordance with their track record right now, man. And they keep claiming, this is the second coming. Everything's leading up to a better quote unquote DC universe. And then it's like, yeah, and yet these projects keep bombing and getting canned.
That is funny that you mentioned the respect you had for David a little bit when stuff like this happens, because a bunch of members in the Snyder fan base, like Manu, for example, he's been on the show before. He tweeted to David and he's like, I'm looking forward to you going back to horror films. Like, you did great when you were doing those.
Yes, I saw that. And I agree.
Yeah, and then David, like, he didn't reply to Manu, but he liked that tweet, and then he put out a tweet that said, I can't wait to get back into horror again. And if people are like, oh, great, like, this is good. Like, you did something good back then, and you made 2 shitty movies, but it doesn't mean that, even this fan base is going to abandon you. Yeah.
Right.
Well, Zachary Levi has doubled down on his stuff. He has taken to interviews and Twitter to blame the toxic DC fan base over the film's box office performance. He also went on to blame critics for not liking fun films, and he blamed Warner Brothers Discovery for marketing. Why did this fail, Sam? Do you disagree or agree with Levi here?
This is grasping at straws, right? He's the Spider-Man meme with the 2 fingers pointing. It's everywhere except the film, right? It's HBO because they didn't tell enough people about it. It's the fan base. It's the critics. Next, he's gonna. I'm waiting for him to blame the theaters, right? Well, the theaters didn't put it on the roll that we like. They used a 32 millimeter roll, and we asked for a 36. The movie's completely different if you watch it on a different millimeter roll. It's like, come on, dude, just do what the director did, being like, hey guys, sorry it didn't work out. We thought it was going to be a lot better. Our apologies. We know it's not great. I hope you continue to support me. That's all you need to do, man. Not every film you put out needs to be successful. That's part of being an artist, right? Is like sometimes it just doesn't go the way you want it to, and you scrap that and you do something else. I hate when they do this thing of they go into denial about it, and it's like, dude, no one liked it. What do you want here? Like, the critics didn't like it. The fans obviously didn't like it. It didn't make money. Whether or not HBO Max marketed it enough, people knew about the movie, man. I couldn't watch a YouTube video without the trailer coming up.
Yeah, and it was on the back of comic books. It was all over the place. They marketed that movie. The problem still is what I've repeated like for the last couple months is there was no hook for the general audience. There was no cool villain. There was no cool plot that they were like, oh, okay, I want to see it because of that. It's just a bunch of humorous scenes thrown into a trailer, and that's not enough for the general audience to jump in.
Right. For me, the sweet spot with the trailer is I get a general overview of the plot or the themes of the movie without it actually spoiling anything. You don't need to do a big reveal, but just show us something to get asses in seats.
Like, what's the movie literally about?
Like you said. Right. That's what I was going to say. I don't even know who the villain of this movie is. I think Lucy Liu's in it, which I like her, but it's not enough to get me to go see what I know is going to be a dumb, mediocre film, especially with how expensive movies are, man. Like, I'm not getting to a theater to go watch this, and I'm not streaming it when I only have so much time in the day. Like, you got to show me something.
Well, and I'm going to get into my fandom here a little bit because he famously, before the Snyder Cut was released, before they announced it, he was asked at a convention, I think it was in Brazil, of what do you think about the Snyder Cut, and do you think it should be released? I don't know why they asked him, but they did. And he was like, there's no Snyder Cut. It doesn't exist. Those fans are delusional. And he mocked the fan base like heavy about it, like it was a big joke. And then now he's blaming us. So it's kind of funny where he started blaming us. And today, actually, he backtracked on Twitter and he's like, no, I love the Snyderverse fan base. Actually, I've seen almost all of Zach's movies. So I actually love all of you. I don't know where this is coming from. And we're like, dude, you're blaming us and also not at the same time. Like, you're throwing everything under the sun except blaming yourself.
Right.
You're doubling down. Your actions speak otherwise. It's just a sad thing to see. This
screams of please support my next project or start watching this movie. Like, it's like, dude, people are going to like what they like, just deal with it and move on. Don't blame other people.
So this movie's budget was $125 million, so it has a long way to go before it can be considered a success. Typically, they say about twice the budget is what you account for when it comes to marketing. So what is that? 250, right?
Yeah.
And 250 million, it made 30 million in the weekend. So not anywhere near there. And now they really killed the box office, as according to Shazam 2's film page on Amazon Prime, the film will be available for purchase digitally beginning in a few weeks here, April 17th.
Yeah, it's over, man.
It's done. So David's out on Twitter publicly like, fuck it, I got paid. And then WB is like, it's going to be out on HBO Max in a few weeks. So why even bother to go to the theater? It won't even be in theaters, I bet, by then.
Oh, no shot. No
They're pulling
shot.
this
You
shit.
know,
John Wick is about to come out.
yeah, I'm gonna be watching that this weekend and loving it. That's the thing too, right? It's like there's nothing they can do when it's that far away from making money. The theaters are way too in demand for them to request a for the movie to stay in the theaters for an extended amount of time. They have to rotate those theaters out because we're about to hit like spring, movie era, which is not as crazy as summer, but this is when we start seeing like a lot of big popcorn movies. So there's no way they're going to be able to keep it in there.
So as bad as Shazam 2 ended up doing with audiences and apparently with critics, people were saying they chose to release Shazam 2 and not tax write it off. What does that tell you about how terrible Batgirl must have been if they went,
oh man, I was thinking
okay.
about that. Like they pushed this thing out and it went down like a lead balloon and they didn't release Batgirl. So at this point, I'm like, was Batgirl like a big budget version of like a college film project? Like
Right.
were they just showing up in the suits? Someone's got a script hidden in the oven and they're just reading off lines in between takes. Like what the hell was going on with that thing?
Good riddance, as always. As always, man. They avoided it with Batgirl. Like that, again, that was a good decision, although they probably should have canned this one as well. So with Gunn's wife showing up in this, and they were pushing this film, Safran and Gunn showed up at the premiere. Based on its box office performance, do you think that reflects poorly on Gunn's universe when that gets started? Because he put in his characters in this film, and all of the Snyderverse antis were championing this movie as well as Gunn's universe, but where the fuck are they? Why aren't they showing up and supporting this? I know if I were anti-Snyder, I'd be watching all of these films multiple times just to show my support for what's coming.
Yeah, this is definitely a bad look for James Gunn. I mean, he also originally was in favor of Black Adam. He was all about like, oh, it's a new era, all of this nonsense. And so far, I know he didn't have a direct hand in that, but he was definitely trying to back his new home. So he's 0 for 2 right now. And it's a bad look, man. And this is what a lot of people were saying is, other than Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, name a movie that Gunn's directed that people actually still talk about.
Exactly.
And there's controversy around the first Guardians as to how much of that he actually wrote. So it's like, if it's just Gunn time, do we actually have a good track record here, or is he just the devil
Yeah, and the Suicide Squad just came out, like, I think 2 years ago. Already forgotten. Almost immediately forgotten.
Nobody's talking about it.
Last thing I have on this news story is from one of our fellow hosts, Nick, who does Buds Bros and Superheroes, and he took to his Twitter handle of Buds Bros Superhero to tweet out, quote, "My dislike for @Zachary Levi playing Shazam has nothing to do with my love for @Zack Snyder or Snyder Cut. It's because Shazam's not portrayed well in these movies, and Levi brings nothing to the role. Levi whining now is even more childish than how he plays Shazam somehow." End quote.
It's accurate.
I mean, that was my biggest problem with his portrayal in Shazam. I mean, I don't know how much Shazam you've read in the comics, but even if you've just watched Justice League or Justice League Unlimited, they've retconned it since then because of the film. But when he says Shazam and transforms into Captain Marvel, he gets the wisdom. He gets all of the different power. It's not just superpowers. He also gets the age that comes with those characters, with those gods in the powers. He's not just a kid trapped in an adult's body. they showed that in Justice League Unlimited. Like, yeah, he was acting a little childish, like, oh my God, the Justice League. But he was also like, well, I got to do this press interview. There's still some growing that happens when he turns into Captain Marvel. But in this, I don't know why Levi decided to play it like a 7-year-old as opposed to the 12-year-old that Billy Batson was.
Yeah, this kind of leads back into what we were talking about, where it's like, why is the actual child actor acting older than the 35-year-old guy that's playing the grown-up version of him? There's a disconnect there. And yeah, I've read a decent amount of Shazam comics. I also really like him in Injustice. He shows up in the Young Justice cartoon for a long time, and it's exactly like you said. He gets what is it, the wisdom of Apollo or
Solomon or something? Yeah,
wisdom of Solomon. Yeah, so it's like he has an adult's brain essentially when he's transformed. It's not, an 8-year-old that thinks about like, how do I use my powers to get free ice cream, which I'm pretty sure is a plot point in one of these movies. So it's odd. And yeah, I hate the way he's portrayed in that movie. I think the kid playing him actually does a really good job. I think Zachary Levi is just showing that he only knows how to play like dumb college frat bros. And then he's like, what if I take it down even further?
And that's exactly what he did for these films. And I saw some of the clips on Twitter from this film, and it's exactly the same. I saw that leaked image of, or that leaked scene of Wonder Woman showing up in the movie, and he's doing, it's all, she's reduced to I want to bang you. Like, that's what that's all reduced to. And it's like, okay, so they didn't learn anything from the first film.
No, of course not. But the first one, I believe, actually made money, but that was apparently a fluke. And it was kind of like, okay, we'll go along with this. There's enough here. And then part 2 shows up and they're like, oh, fuck, it's more of the same. We're out.
Well, and the difference too with Shazam 1, I went to see it in theaters. I spoke positively about it here on the podcast with the adoption parent scene. The way they handled adoption was done well. The whole scene with his mom, where it was really dark, and it's like, holy shit, I didn't expect that to be my real mom isn't my parent anymore. Like, that realization was done really well. But I still had some goodwill towards Warner Brothers at that time. Not, it wasn't straight downhill yet. But since then, they have really spat in the face of a huge chunk of their money, their fan base. And so people like me went, no, I'm not going to give you my money, man. You're not giving, we're telling you what we want, and you refuse to make money. So, okay, well, why would I'm voting with my dollar here.
Why would I begrudgingly go see something that I'm not that interested in just to keep praying that you give me the thing that we've all been asking for that is going to make you money when we've been saying the same thing for 4 years?
And it's going to keep happening. It's going to, and also Gunn's to blame. I don't know if you knew that Gunn is the one who suggested Levi to Peter Safran to play Captain Marvel.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me. They seem like they probably get along based on their, juvenile humor.
Well, there you go. You can blame Gunn for another thing, everyone. The shitty ass Levi. So we've got Ben also actually shitting on James Gunn, as he has officially shot down the possibility of him directing anything from James Gunn and Peter Safran's slate of new DC superhero movies. So Gunn first tweeted back in December that he had spoken with Ben, said, quote, precisely because he wants to direct and we want him to direct. We just have to find the right project, end quote. But Ben Affleck now has said in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, quote, I would not direct something for Gunn DC. Absolutely not. I have nothing against Gunn. Nice guy. Sure, he's going to do a great job. I just wouldn't want to go in and direct in the way they're doing that. I'm not interested in that, end quote. More lies from Gunn.
Yeah, that honestly cracked me up because it really just shows that he has no idea what the fuck he's talking about with any of this stuff. He's just trying to get enough people on his side to where it looks like what he's doing is a success. But when you're putting it on social media, people can see that, dude. Like, of course Ben's eventually going to respond to it. You're talking about something that never fucking happened. And he's obviously trying to get people's hopes up, like the the Snyderverse fans and stuff being like, "Hey, look, we're talking to Ben. You might still get a Snyderverse related project." And Ben can just, as easily as he, eventually did, go, "I haven't been talking about shit with that. I'm not doing that." The veneer is falling off very quickly here.
I took it as a great thing. I was like, good, Ben, don't be involved in that universe. And that also frees him up for not necessarily to do his Batfleck film for Zack, but it frees him up to do things like that Nike movie that he's doing. He's doing movies like Deep Water. He's making good films that are outside of, like, The Last Duel was amazing. And
Yeah.
he's doing these films that are like, okay, great. Like, do that final Flash little cameo that he refilmed, or Aquaman 2, and don't be involved in that universe. I think he's really avoiding a huge trap there by not being involved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, dude, Ben's an amazing director. He's one of my favorite directors. The dude has a fucking Oscar for a movie based on a CIA project that no one gave a shit about. He doesn't need to be involved in what is gonna obviously be this cheap cash grab cinematic Marvel ripoff. Like, he's better off without it. If he were to do that, they were gonna lock him into some shitty contract where he's got to direct 9 movies.
Right.
And he can't back out, and he's got to have all this interconnective shit with other projects that are gonna bomb. So he's so much better off without having to do that. Every single one of his movies are really fucking good. Like, he also directed Gone Baby Gone, I think, and that movie fucking slaps. So he does not need to do this.
Again, good on Ben, and it's so fun to watch the spiral. It's already beginning. But this last news story, we're finally getting some clarity on that mysterious Snyder video that released last week with Ray Porter returning as Darkseid. And we have some answers now. As Zack Snyder posted on Vero an image of Henry Cavill's Superman with the following quote: "Man of Steel, BVS, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Life is a cycle, from birth to death to rebirth. And so the hero's journey is a cycle as well. A continuous journey of growth and transformation. April 28, 29, and 30th, end quote. He then followed it up with posts from Batman and Wonder Woman continuing the hero's journey and posting on a return after a major trial of transformation. So before we go into what this means as far as screenings, because it's now confirmed that that's what those dates mean, any hopes at all that this means anything by him referring to death and rebirth on any kind of continuation?
Yeah, I actually did. I thought this might have meant he had gotten rights to strike up a deal somewhere, like with Netflix or with independent filmmakers or something, to get some of these shelved projects greenlit. I'm always weary of this stuff because it always feels like everything's in flux now. With anything related to DC, like, it's so ambiguous whether or not we are getting Constantine at this point. So
Right.
I was kind of like, if this is something awesome, but I'm gonna hold my cards close to my chest and see what happens, because even if they promised him all of this stuff, it doesn't mean they'll deliver. So I was kind of like, that would be really fucking cool. I'll wait and see if any other news comes out.
With him picking these quotes specifically, he knows that the fan base will dissect, will analyze all of that stuff, anything he puts up, because he said in the past that everything he posts means something. There's always something else behind it. So with those quotes specifically, he's talking about death and rebirth. To me, that also means, I agree, that we're going to get a confirmation of one or two things. Either we're going to get more projects, 2 more films, whatever it is. I don't want a comic book project. I don't want an animated film, but if it's one of those, it'll be confirmed. Or he's going to come out and say, we're celebrating our 3 films and this is it, guys. There's no hope of me getting any more projects. I feel like this is that event of we're going to get more, or we're definitely not. So let's focus on Rebel Moon or whatever. Let's stop the fight. If it's neither of these things, I will feel a little bit jaded out of that because of these quotes, because it's like, you're hyping us up big, man. And I know, keep your expectations low. I understand that. But he's having guests show up here. Probably, maybe Henry Cavill is going to show up on one of these screenings. So it's a big deal. Like, this is a pretty big event. So for nothing to come out of this, I would be pretty disappointed.
Oh yeah, for sure. How would you feel if it was something like he's using all of those actors, but they're playing like slightly different characters, like almost a Watchmen type thing? Would you still feel like cheated, or would you be like if it were a spiritual successor, essentially, would you feel okay with that? Or if it was a continuation of the themes of his stories, but he's like, we can't use those characters, but it's essentially it's that moving forward. Would you feel a little better about that, or would you feel worse?
That'd be hilarious if it were like Watchmen, like you were saying, because they couldn't use certain characters back when they did that book. So then he created new ones and they ended up being huge, right? So
Right.
that would be funny to me. Like, he has always said, though, no compromise, right? That's been his big thing. At one point when the Snyder Cut was, they're like, all right, fine, Zach, you can release it, but we're not giving you any more money. You can release it in its form right now. And he was like, no, I'm not going to release it then. I'd rather no one see it as it is now, ever see it, than to not finish it properly with the special effects. That's what was missing. So they were like, fine, we're not releasing it. And he's like, okay. So he didn't compromise. And eventually they came back and they're like, okay, here's $70 million. So as long as it's what Zach wants to do, I think is going to be my answer. Because if anyone knows the right call as to when to compromise, if at all, it would be him. So
I am really anxious to see what it is, though.
A little over a month away now.
Yes. Yeah.
Has been confirmed that Man of Steel and BVS will be screened at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California for days 1 and 2, and that the Snyder Cut will be screened through IMAX on day 3 at Universal City Walk in California. So following each screening will be a panel with Snyder teasing potential special guests on board for the Man of Steel Q&A. And the whole convention will be raising money for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. Zach said in a recent interview, quote, finding out that so many fans of the movie were also struggling with issues of mental health or thoughts of suicide. That through the movie and through the experience of getting the movie made, people were able to find this sort of rallying cry or this common cause. And also a thing that they loved that struggled, that had a relationship to mental health that they could connect with and feel a personal relationship toward. And I think that's kind of what the movie has become in a lot of ways, and the movement around the movie has become, end quote. So already for a good thing. Like even if it's not for future announcements, it's already raising money for a good cause.
As someone that has struggled with mental health over the years, I always, especially as an adult, right? Comics and superheroes have always kind of been like a form of escapism or like a beacon almost. Like, they're fictional, obviously, but it's always inspiring when the characters you grew up with are written in a way that it's like, we know what you're going through, that exists in this world too. Let's talk about it. And obviously, with it having affected Zach on such a personal level, it's even more important to him. So I think it's really great, the the kind of synergy he has with the fan base, of how supportive the fan base has been about these issues, and then him in turn feeding off that support and furthering the cause. Because it's something that a lot of people, especially our generation, has a hard time talking about. But it's a lot easier when you can bring it up through the lens of a film or superheroes or comic books.
When I rewatched the movie, he has said before that Cyborg is the heart of the film, and completely gutted out, right? In the Joey Whedon version of Justice League, he's reduced to the Teen Titans version of like, booyah. He says it in that cut of the film. You watch the Snyder Cut, and his journey is of someone who is struggling with what he has, what he's become. And what I love about it is he's in this place of fuck the world, and he's in this dark place. And by the end of it, when he's inside the mother boxes, the mom says to him, "My broken boy," because that's how he saw himself. And then he tells them, "I'm not broken and I'm not alone." Like that message is huge among the AFSP community, and the fact that it's in the film, already the heart of the film is on that subject. It's about not being broken. It's about not being alone. It just resonates so much stronger on the rewatch. You really see how important Cyborg and that message is in the film.
Yeah, and it's felt throughout all of his movies too. You know, the whole thing with Ben's Batman and BVS is he's not the person that he wants to be or that Alfred wants him to be, but that doesn't mean you're stuck like that forever either. You know, you can still move forward and learn and grow and be better. And I think that's a big part, I think, of mental health, and especially depression and suicide for a lot of people, is you feel stuck and you're this version of yourself that you never intended to be. And it's that feeling of like, this is how it's always going to be now. And, you know, if there's one thing that those movies showed, it's like, no, you can always come back out the other side healthier and more receptive to people.
And I think that message would continue should we get more projects, more in the films. Darkseid might even be he's, by some writers, he's been seen as the ultimate end or the ultimate negative of the universe, and that could be equated to, I mean, it even connects more to the mother boxes, which are so connected to the anti-life equation and to Darkseid. The fact that the mother box told him you're broken, it's almost like that Darkseid might even be, maybe in future films, symbolically that depression of that universe. He took over this world barren and wants the anti-life equation, and there's this bit of hope in these heroes to try to fix all of this, to try to fix this world. So I really hope we get it for that, because I know that message should continue in the next two films. And for fans at home, Zack did say that a live streaming event and virtual panels on Vero True Social will accompany the in-person screening. So if you're not in California, we should be able to stream this on Vero. If you don't have Vero, people tend to mirror this over to YouTube. So that's how I ended up watching it, because Vero crashed during the last Q&A. So I had to rewatch it on YouTube, and thankfully people re-uploaded it.
Hell yeah. Hopefully there's a really good turnout for this too, since it's for a good cause. So
last thing I'll say on this here, which I'll ask you too, during that same interview, it was during a live streaming event with this particular group that had them. I won't name them because there's a lot of controversy in the fandom, and I'm not on their side either. People know for sure, so I'm not even gonna give them any publicity. But they were purposefully not answering questions in the Q&A and the super chat for people that were like throwing up $100 and asking, "Will you get more? What's the word with Restore the Snyderverse? What's the word with Netflix? Are we going to get more films?" They were purposefully not answering these, putting the people involved aside. Do you think that there was this mandate maybe from Zack of, let's not answer this question? Because if we do get that announcement at the event, you don't want that question asked, because what's he going to say? Is he going to say, "Oh, I don't know, why don't you tune in this weekend?" Or would he lie and say, "They haven't talked to me"? So instead, by them just saying, "We're not going to answer that question," it seems like if there's an announcement coming on that weekend, that would be why they wouldn't want that question asked.
yeah, I definitely think it's I mean, he's gonna get the question, obviously. I think the smartest way, or not smartest, but like the safest way to go about it would be essentially to say, if there was something I could communicate to you, I would communicate it. I think that's the best way, because you're not saying yes and you're not saying no. You're not lying about it, and you're not, I don't think you're giving people false hope, but it's also not saying it's off the table either. It's essentially saying, like, I have to figure this out before I put it out there.
Yeah, that would be a good answer.
Yeah, and that way, you know, if it is like an announcement that's going to drop this weekend, he's still not lying to you. You know,
Right.
he's telling you, like, now is not time for me to say it.
Yeah, that would
But
be good.
he's been very smart and diplomatic about this stuff in the past. So I have a feeling like whatever it is, he's gonna be honest with people about it.
Exactly right. The last time he was asked directly was like 4 months back on another stream, and he was saying Warner Brothers Discovery has not approached me with that. No. and he like had this smile on, like he was trying to not say, he was trying to be careful with his answer. So that gave me a bit of hope. Like, oh, what do you mean by that? Is it Netflix? And there was a lot behind it. You can tell by the way Zach answers certain questions when he's answering like straight up, or when there's more to it. Or maybe he was pissed that they asked him that and he told them ahead of time, like, don't ask me that question. And then they did. I don't know. But
yeah, that could be.
But I do think there might be something behind it. And again, like we said last week, not getting our hopes up, but if we get any answers, I do think it will be at the end of April.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So before we head into the Brocat block, we have a comment from Adrian on Patreon from last week's episode. He said, quote, I definitely saw that Zack Snyder Full Circle post. It came out of nowhere. I am sure he's screening all DC films. I don't know if he'll announce anything. I don't want to jump to conclusions. That's how I let myself down. I want something extremely positive to come out of this. Regarding Ayer, he gives me whiplash. He flip-flops all the time. He defends Leto Joker one day and then regrets something about Leto Joker the next, and is constantly bootlicking Pedo Gunn. I want his cut, but I don't want it under James Gunn. End quote. I agree, Adrian. People have asked me, what if the Ayer cut comes out, but it's produced by James Gunn? I'm not going to see it. Bobby's asked me, what if they restore the Snyderverse, but James is a producer on these films? I can't watch them. Sorry. And I'm on your side, Adrian. And I think they would know. Well, David doesn't. I think if they release the Ayer cut, it's going to be under Gunn, so I can't support it. But if we get more from Zach, Gunn won't be tied in any way.
No, I don't think if that were to happen, he would either. And I'm right there with you. We've been joking about like, all right, when Gunn releases this Nightwing movie, you're going to be there. And it's like, there's a difference between directors I don't like and directors that I have a moral objection to. Let's even just go with like the way that type of movie would be made, right? Because James Gunn only makes one type of movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that movie is being talked about, by the way. It's he's going to go, oh yeah, Dick's funny. I made a funny movie with Guardians of the Galaxy, and it would just be frat boy humor. So that alone is like, no, I wouldn't go see that. But yeah, absolutely. Like, there's no room, in my opinion, at least, for compromising of like, oh, well, it's kind of what I wanted, but not really. Because look at the fucking road we had to go to get even that, dude. They're literally just throwing darts at a dartboard to try and make money. It's not about making fans happy anymore.
I gotta ask you, so you're saying, because I heard this all the time at the comic shop, is Nightwing the Spider-Man of the DC universe? Do you agree with that quote?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad comparison, actually. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because, like, especially in 90s and early 2000s Spider-Man, I really like all of the Superior Spider-Man stuff with, like, the slot. Yeah. And, like, all the slot stuff I thought was really solid. And, yeah, I think they're different, but there's a lot of similarities. They both crack jokes. They're both very emotional characters, and I think the main thing, I think most people on the surface, it's going to be like they both joke around a lot, which is true. They're both quippy, but I think the bigger thing is both of them have an emotional integrity where it's like the other people that they surround themselves with are uplifted by them being there,
right? And
I think they're both also the last people to realize that. So I do think, I think saying Nightwing is the Spider-Man of the DC universe, it's not inaccurate, but I don't think it's a bad thing either. And it's not saying that he's a carbon copy either. It's not it's not a Deadpool versus Deathstroke thing. It's more of being like, that's a role that I think a lot of characters have tried to fill, and none of them particularly successfully, and I think both of those characters do well in that role.
I don't disagree. There's a lot of similarities there. I think one of the integral parts of Spider-Man, and I don't know if this is the case with Dick Grayson too, but with Spider-Man it's almost like Peter Parker can't exist if Spider-Man exists. Like there's this weird, I heard this on Word Balloon, I think, of people were saying that there's this weird balance, one of the writers, of if Spider-Man is too successful, then Peter Parker his life starts to crumble. And if Peter Parker's life starts to thrive, then Spider-Man's starts to crumble. So there's this non-happiness between the two. He has to stay in the middle of like not complete misery, but not complete happiness either, kind of like this weird balance. So I don't know if that theme is also in Nightwing, but I think that's a huge part of Spider-Man. And correct me if I'm wrong though.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it's portrayed a little bit differently with Nightwing, and they've touched on this a lot in the most recent comics. You know, Tom Taylor's portrayed it really well. Dick's thing is he gets happiness from making other people happy to the extent where he is self-destructive, and he has this mindset of like, if even though I love helping other people all the time, if I ask someone else for help, it's being a burden. And one of the things that Tom Taylor's really tried to illustrate is asking other people for help when you need it is a good thing. You don't have to forsake your own happiness to make other people happy. It's all about give and take. And I think that those two things are very close together. And yeah, I would agree. Like Dick's whole thing is, you know, the best way for me to live a fulfilling life is to protect everyone else and do right by them. And it's like, yeah, well, at some point you have to do right by yourself also.
Very good. I'm excited to read the Titans comic that just got solicited. I added that to my sub, so I'll be reading that by Tom Taylor as well. So huge thanks, Adrian, for the Patreon comment. Let's head into the final portion of today's show, the Broket Block. What we've been doing this week since you last heard us, what's been making us broke. So Sam, let's start it off with you. What have you been up to since you were last on?
I mentioned it in the Discord, but I hit up that Barnes & Noble buy one, get one half off manga. I actually picked up a book for a friend with the 50% off, but I got the 3-in-1 edition, volume 1 of the Pokemon Adventures from 97.
Yes. So good.
Yeah, I'm a little over halfway through it, so I'm loving it so far. It's great. I can't wait to pick up volume 2. Been watching a ton of anime, for some of it for Ronin Council, some of it for myself. I did recently, it's not super nerd related, but I found out I had a 3 or 4 month free trial to Apple for being a PlayStation Plus member. So I watched Ted Lasso. Binged. It's really good. In a good way, it's probably one of the strangest comedies I've seen in a long time, because there's no negative humor in it, which I realize like every show relies on now. And I like a lot of cynical humor, but it's kind of crazy. Jason Sudeikis' character, his whole thing is just like, yeah, if I just be really nice to people, eventually they'll want to be better versions of themselves. And it generally works out for him, but it's super funny. You know, he's an American in an all British cast, and I tend to like a lot of British humor, so it's really good. Other than that, I picked up the most recent issue of Nightwing. Really liked it. I mean, issue 100 is, I think, one of the best issues of any Nightwing run, but
oh wow,
the 101 was a really good follow-up. It's a lot of lead into the Titan story, but that's not bad by any means. Someone randomly bought 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim off my wish list on Amazon, so I platinumed that, which means I didn't do anything but play that game for a few days.
So no editing then for everyone.
Oh man, I did a lot of editing. Thankfully, Mike is taking care of this episode. I'm just going to be doing all the social media stuff. We did run for about 3.5 hours again, even though we really streamlined a lot of it. There was just a lot of news, but that first episode took me about a week and a half to edit.
Wow. How many hours per combined would you say you spent editing?
Probably about somewhere between 9 and 12 hours, if I had to guess. I was being overly meticulous because it was the first one I had done, and I hadn't edited in a long time, so I was very weary of like perma-deleting something, which I know is actually really hard to do, but I was just so paranoid about like accidentally cutting out something that was going to make the show not make sense. So I was just being very meticulous. I was also being overly meticulous about like noise gating and filtering a lot of things. Like I was, telling Mike like, oh, I should have it done later. I just want to get rid of all these keystroke noises. He's like, dude, come on, man. Those are going to be in there. And I was like, no, I can get them out. I just have to isolate this one part. And I think we were all very happy with how it came out. But yeah, it was a lot of time. I was pretty much coming home from work every day, editing until I had to go to sleep. There was like a couple days where I was like, I'm burnt out. I gotta like watch TV or something for an hour before I go back to it. And then like on my days off, it was pretty much get up, shower, eat, do chores, do whatever social obligations I had to do, edit. But I'm super happy with how it came out. The next time around, my goal is to not be so overly meticulous and frantic about it, but it came out well. And like I said at the beginning of the show, we're so spoiled that we get to just come on here and then you do all of this stuff because man, is it a lot. I think even just like not having to sync up, the recording and everything, because that's something Mike and Scott and I'll do, is make sure we all have our own separate files so that we have the master and the individual files in case shit goes sideways. So even that is a relief, not having to go, okay, on 3, someone has to go to the bathroom. So on 3, everyone hit stop. And then on 3, we all clap and we check again. Like it's good. I like having a backup plan, but God, is it nice to just come on and be a guest.
No, I got you, man. And if you keep doing it, you'll get faster at it. You'll find shortcuts. You'll find other things that would get you to where you need to be a lot faster. Like one of the things that I did for the longest time, I think I told you about it, was when there was like a 10-second sound of just silence, I would go through every sound that was quiet, like any dead air, I would cut out and I would put in, the dialogue, and I would manually do that for every episode. And I did that for years until I found on Alphonic, there's one little thing. You click effect, truncate silence, choose, the threshold of how much silence and what do you want to cut down to. If there's over this much, what do you want to cut down to? I'm like, oh shit. So I did that. And then it did the whole episode, cut out all that dead air for me. And then I'm like, damn, I could have been using that for years. And then the volume levels was another thing. I was going in and making all the volumes go up and down when Kelly and I were recording back then. And so when she would speak too loudly, I'd be like, oh, okay, let's try not to peak too much. And then I found out about Alphonic. You go to Alphonic, throw the file up, it levels out all the audio for you. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. So that's one less thing. So I've got it at the fastest now. It is streamlined a little bit though, depending on hosts. I will take a little bit longer. Like if I know some hosts say a lot more than others, so getting rid of all that takes a little bit longer. Or Julian has a tendency, this is just the way he speaks, I'm not speaking ill of him, but he likes to start over his sentences 2 or 3 times before he continues his thought. So all of that I have to cut out. But otherwise, it's still the fastest I've been at editing, just because of those 2 little things I found: the truncate silence and the Alphonic. You'll get there, man. You'll definitely get quicker at it.
Yeah, it definitely felt like an accomplishment when it was finished, for sure. And even as I was doing it, I was like, oh, okay, I was definitely picking up some tricks and stuff. So, overall, a really good learning experience, because I've always been a hands-on learner. Like, you could tell me something 20 times, but I don't know if I can actually do it until I do it, man.
Exactly right. And I think that speaks a lot on you, that you want to go in and make sure that it's not, because so many podcasts, man, I've heard where they just record it and then they just upload it. And I'm like, if you're not going to take the time to edit out the show to save the listeners time, even if you just cut out a minute of an hour episode, compound that to the number of downloads you have. Let's say it's 100 downloads. That's 100 collective minutes that you could have saved people. So that's where I get mad of podcasters that just throw out the episode. And it's like, okay, if my time is invaluable to you, why should I be listening to this when you're not even polishing it at all? You're just putting it up.
Well, if you're going to do it like that, you might as well let people listen to it live, honestly.
Exactly.
If you're not even, cutting anything down or, trying to smooth things out, like, all right, man, then just live stream this shit.
Yeah, be a streamer, don't be a podcaster.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I want to hear about what you've been up to, what your making yourself broke on.
Well, I gave Bobby a nice little pile of CGC books to send in because I kept finding books and he finds those signings that CGC does of like, I can't really do conventions anymore as far as let me spend the day and get these signatures and get someone from CGC to witness this signature, go back to the booth, pay them, and then send it out. CGC
It's
does
such
is
a
really
shit show
convenient. It
now,
is,
too.
man. It is. Like, I get the whole thing of let me meet the creator and see them sign this thing. But I've met so many creators at this point that it's like, what am I going to tell them? Like that they haven't heard a million times or that I need them to answer, honestly.
Well, and they want you to keep the line moving too. So it's
Yeah.
not like you can have an in-depth conversation with them.
We have Twitter now. There's so many of them that have a Twitter that I can, and they'll respond. They'll say, hey, you're doing a great job with this comic book. Thank you so much. And that's what I would have told them at the convention anyway. So now CGC has this thing where, okay, you pay an extra fee and you send in your book, they'll get it signed by the creator, they grade it, and then they send it back to you. And it's like, all right, awesome. So that saves me waiting an hour, 2 hours in line, saves me getting the witness to come over. It just saves so much time. And I think CGC did a great thing with this. And these are creators that you might not ever meet. Someone like Alex Ross is on there. Like you're going to pay a pretty penny for that. But it's like, when would I ever have met Alex Ross anyway? So it provides this opportunity for collectors to be like, okay, let me mail this off, not worry about it, and it'll be back in a few months. Signed, signature graded.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So I ended up getting Stanley Lau Artgerm. I sent in the variant cover to Harley Quinn #1. It's the one where she's blowing a kiss and there's a heart, and they've made a statue out of it at this point. So I sent that one in. And then I also sent in for Ejiruki, I think is how you pronounce it. And he did the Darkstalkers Morgan MegaCon variant. And I ended up getting the regular and the Virgin variant. I like the regular one just fine, so I flipped the Virgin on eBay, and I ended up breaking even. So I'm like, cool. So I got a free variant, basically, out of it. And now I'm getting that variant graded and signed by him because I love Darkstalkers, I love Morgan, and it's a great variant. And then non-signed books, I sent in stuff like the first printing of Department of Truth, which is my current favorite comic book. There's Batman Damned, #1, the Bat Penis. that's
The uncensored one?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, they did not do a second printing of it. The only time you can get an uncensored version is digitally or the hardcover.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you get the Bat Penis in there. And then I put in the first appearance of Damian Wayne as Robin from Battle for the Cow #3.
Awesome.
So it's not quite his first appearance yet. I got to track that down somehow. And then there was a few more. The Dark Knight's medal for the one-shots, the foil variant, not variants, but the foil covers to Batman the Red Death and Batman Who Laughs, which are beautiful covers. And I just wanted to
really
get those
good.
graded.
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
Once you get those sent in, they'll come in, and I think in a month or two, and I'll head on over, pick them up from Bobby, and and I'll be a happy camper. But that's going to be a hefty bill right there. All those comic books, Pokemon cards that I gave him. I don't even remember what I submitted. It's up on Discord, but I know the most recent one is the Bulbasaur Illustrator card, and I got that, and I'm going to have that graded. So yeah, I'm going to be spending quite a bit on CGC grading.
Yeah, I still need to. I keep forgetting to throw my first graded books up on Discord, but it was actually pretty quick, so you might get them back sooner than you expect. But you did send in a lot, so I don't know. It could be a month.
I also sent in a little DM to Dustin Wynn. Nothing crazy, but he was like, "Oh, Jeff Lemire and I are going to be working on something soon." And I was like, "Yeah." Jeff teased it on Word Balloon, and he liked it. So I'm starting to plant the seed for that eventual interview that I'm going to ask him for. What I almost trolled you, and then I was like, "No, this is too cruel." But
that would be cruel, yeah.
You know that Skype interview that we were gonna do with the people from Udon?
Yeah.
You couldn't get your Skype to work, and I was gonna be like, "Oh, so Dustin he agreed to do the interview. He can only do it tomorrow though, and through Skype."
God damn it!
But
how did that interview go?
It was good. Yeah, it was good. It went up on Wednesday, and he actually wanted to keep talking. Like we ran I think 43 minutes. It was pretty short, but he was like, "Oh, we didn't even talk about the video game art books. We didn't talk about this." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't." I'm like, "Yeah, talk about it now, and I'll throw it into the episode." And he touched on it, but I thought he just wanted to focus, like, because I asked him about Street Fighter 6, and so I kept the
Yeah.
conversation at just that for the most part. But he liked it enough to where he's like, "Oh, do you want to?" He told me about. I'm not going to obviously say it on here, but he shared some books that they have coming up that haven't been solicited. So he's like, "This is coming out. This is coming out." And I'm like, "Okay, do you want to talk about it again in August when it gets solicited?" He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." I'm like, "All right." So there's a little
Oh,
connection
awesome.
there
Maybe
with
my
with Unum.
Skype will work by then.
Yeah, well, now I'm planting the seed on your end because I know you're contacting Microsoft, but it's like that may be a reality where one day Dustin's book can get solicited any day now, and I'll be like, he agreed to do the interview, but it's through Skype, Sam.
No, I'll get it working again. They gotta verify everything because my account got hacked. It's a whole thing. So they're thinking I made like a bunch of weird transactions and said I violated terms of agreement. I'm like, it wasn't me. I don't live in Alaska.
I mean, I guess at worst, I'm sure you would have created a new account by then if that were the case. But that was one of the things where I'm like, what am I going to invite Dustin to the Discord so he can join the voice chat or something? I wish there was a way that I can send the link to just this chat so that he doesn't have to worry about joining any Discords.
Mike and I have been doing it through Zoom too, so that also could be an option.
I've looked into that, and I know that costs money if you want to do over an hour of recording. You have
That's
to do like
the
an annual
problem, yeah.
subscription.
$15, I think, or
Ye-
30.
Something
Yeah.
like that. And then also, I had tested it out during COVID, and at the time, this software wouldn't pull just the audio and do it as 2 tracks, where it does it for Discord, it does it for Skype, but it wouldn't do it for Zoom. So that was my big problem with it, where I'm like, all right, I need the 2 tracks because your volume levels on your end are not the same as my volume levels on my end. So that's a big problem. Even though I use Auphonic, initially I have to raise or lower someone's volume.
I don't know for sure if it does that, but Mike records via Zoom as well as we all record in Audacity, and he sends me the Zoom file as well as his Audacity file, and the Zoom is treated as like the master track. So I think it's just the volume levels of whoever is recording it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if you can split the track or not. So yeah, I could see how that would be an issue.
I do want to save the Daquan story for the post-end jingle of today's episode, so we'll leave that content for after that. But the last thing on my end is Sophia is going to be early. So she was due next month, and now they're going to have to induce a lot earlier because of Kelly's blood pressure. They don't want to run into risk further complications to Kelly or to Sophia. So they already have an induction date next week. And by maybe not by the time the next episode comes out. By the time the next episode comes out, Sophia will be here. But I know by the time we record, it'll be like a day or two beforehand. So it's coming up a lot quicker than we thought, and that's it, man. We've been ready though. We have the car seat, we have her baby changing stuff, we have her crib where she's gonna sleep, and everything is already set. Thankfully, Kelly's been like really on top of it. And we've been through it once, so it's gone a lot smoother. So we're like, okay, a week earlier, it throws a wrench in our work plans because now we have to tell them, hey, it's not in April anymore. Now I'm going to have to take this paternity leave much sooner in March. But I mean, I'm not the first paternity leave parent. So most of them don't have the luxury of knowing on this day we're going to the hospital. For some people, the water just breaks when it does.
I was going to say, I feel like those like due dates, they're almost like weather forecasts. It's like this, it'll be around this, right? Like just get ready by or preferably before then.
It's like the cable guy or the maintenance guy. Like,
right,
I'll be in between
we'll be there
1 and 3.
Between 9 and 7. You're like, oh, that's it. Okay, sure.
And they show up at 8.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for humoring me a little bit on the Snyderverse stuff. And I know some follow it not as closely as I do, but I mean, you had a lot of good stuff to contribute. And obviously you're looking forward to this event, whatever ends up happening. So thank you again. And please let them know where they can find you and where they can find the new episode of Ronin Console.
You can find me on Instagram, Discord, and I'm kind of on Twitter. I'm just there to troll people.
Nice.
But Instagram, it's Samuel Boylston, my first and last name. Discord, it's Sad Lord. And Twitter, I'm also on there as Samuel Boylston. I may or may not respond to you on there. We'll see what happens. Next episode of Ronin Council, you guys can catch it almost anywhere where you would listen to podcasts. So for most people, that's going to be Spotify, but it's also on Apple Music. The only thing I believe you can't get it on right now is Amazon Music because they're weird. You can pretty much find it on any platform. So if you're into anime or JRPGs, manga, give it a listen. Our episodes are a bit longer than these, but a lot of that is just our recommendations. So if you guys just want some good anime recs, give it a listen and let us know what you think. And yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for having me on. This is honestly one of my favorite things to do. It's always great. And I am so excited that you're going to be the father part 2. That's going to be great for you, man. And now you have one of each.
Right.
That's so exciting. And obviously, you know, I won't speak for the other hosts, but you know, if you need anything at all, you know, feel free to reach out. I am more than willing to do babysitting duties, you know, late night grocery runs, whatever you need, man.
I appreciate that, Sam. That's really kind of you to say. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You see, everyone, this is why, like, Sam's an easy guy to get along with.
I try, man. You know, there's enough crazy shit going on in the world that when you run into good people, I think it's just best to, you know, be there for them and help them out and let them know that you're thinking about them.
Well, as always, if you want to talk to Sam, make sure to follow him and support him over at Ronin Console. There will be links to everywhere you can find them as well in the description of today's episode. So come on back in case you're driving, swipe on over to the description and you will find those links. You will also find a link to our Discord lounge where you can also talk to Sam and the rest of our hosts. That's at the bottom of today's episode and also at the bottom of thereasonsimbroke.com. Click on Discord. You will find the Collector's Corner there, for example, where we share our latest CGC stuff, manga pickups, TCG cards. Scott especially shares a lot of singles on there. John shares his massive first appearances in Silver Age comics. It's a lot of good stuff just for the Collector's Corner alone, but there's a lot of other channels on there. So thank you once again for joining us this week. I've been Daniel, joined by Sam, and Brokehead Core, all will be well. So I don't know why it took me so long. I kept trying to remember. Sam and I need to tell the story about the Quan next door at the convenience store from where I used to work, where you work now. And I told you this story. I think you were the first person I told because I'm like, Sam's gonna love this. Is I went next door. Good. I was trying to get this is at the point where I'm trying to hit my numbers for protein intake. So I'm going next door to get, when either I don't get breakfast, I'm not able to, I go next door during break and I pick out protein bars or muscle milk. So this wasn't an exception. I went over there and I got a thing of muscle milk and I brought it up to him and he goes, "You work out? You go to the gym?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "No, you don't." And I'm like, "I do." and he's like, "When'd you go to the gym?" I'm like, "I went this morning." And he's like, "No, you don't." And I'm like, "I don't know Jesus Christ, what do you?" And I couldn't believe it. What do you want me to
say here?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. So I ran, I checked out and I'm like, "Sam, you wouldn't believe what he just told me." And I told this story to you. And you were talking about how, you tell it, where he expects everyone to look like two of the workers that work in the back, one of which is an actual MMA fighter.
Yeah, so we have a coworker. He's the warehouse manager. He's also a streamer and everything. But he's what you would, I guess, most people would say is swole, right? Like, He's a big dude. You look at him and you go, okay, sure, that guy probably beats people up. And he does. Yeah, I guess in Daquan's eyes, it's like, oh, if you don't look like Joe, you just don't work out. And it's like, Joe is an extreme example, my guy. That's when you just work out and that's your life, dude. Like, and it's funny because the rest of us would always the rest of us being our other coworkers, about how, like, in good of shape Daniel was. Like, I remember you were judging a Pokemon event one time and you picked up a kid's card to read it to see if what the play he was making was valid. And I go, Daniel's fucking shredded. Look at that. His arm is the size of that kid's head. And my coworker and also roommate goes, yeah, I mean, like, if you look at his chest, it looks like he's just going to swallow that kid. It was just so funny because all of us are like, when you said, oh yeah, I go to the gym, all of us were like, oh yeah, big fucking news, Daniel. And then you go over there and he's like, no, I don't believe that you work out.
And he doubled. What I love about it is I told you about this and you're like, oh, I can't wait to tell him. And he doubled down on it. That was the best part.
Yeah.
I just kept laughing.
Going.
Like I was telling you, I'm like, my feelings would be hurt if I wasn't going to the gym. Cause then I'd be like, oh, they can tell that I'm lying or something like that. Right. But I'm like, no, I know I go every fucking morning. This is fucking funny. So,
yeah.
So I love that he doubled down on it because he was like, I don't know, maybe wear a size small shirt or something. And I'm like, right. I just kept laughing. I'm like, what do you, and then you said the best thing of like, who is he to judge anyone on anything? Like the guy's the size of a rail.
Right. I went in there like a month ago buying similar stuff. I always buy the like Lenny and Larry's cookies.
Yes, those are good.
And they're great. And I'll get a lot of times I'll get like the breakfast Cliff bars, or there's a new one that's really good too. I actually they have protein Pop-Tarts now. I bought one from there this morning. And so I was buying that, and I think like flavored water, like the Liquid Death. And then I had vegan jerky. And he goes, are you vegetarian? And I go, yeah. And he goes, no, you're not. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, I've seen you eat pizza. And I'm like, yeah, I wasn't always a vegetarian. And he goes, why are you now then? And I go, well, I just wanted to change some stuff. And he goes, why don't you just be pescatarian? And I'm like, why don't I just be vegetarian? What do you want from this? Are you going to convince me to go, you're right, I should start eating chicken and fish again. It's just better. And then I came in after that the same day, and I bought a sports drink, and he goes, do you work out? And I go, I run sometimes. And he goes, yeah, I can see it, I guess. And I go, but you can't see it on Daniel? What the fuck is wrong with you? And he goes, well, that's not really working out, though. And I'm like, I can't please you.
I love that so I'm not the only one. Everyone that buys something, he just doesn't believe them.
No.
Oh, man. I'm glad we told this story. And I'm glad that there's more to it. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And you can edit this out, but I do have a funny work, since you're going to be a dad again, funny work story about someone else that works there that's a parent.
All right, let me hit and record on this one then.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, fuck you guys.
It's going on forever.
They want to hear it, but they're sorry. See you next week.